iPredict works by gathering the knowledge of its 5,000 plus traders. If a stock has a price of 57 cents, that means the market thinks that event has a 57% chance of happening. If you agree, you buy. If you disagree, you short. And if you're right, you make money. Kia ora, good evening New Zealand. This is day 11 until the country goes to the polls. Welcome to iPredict Election 2011, the most accurate source of political and economic information in New Zealand broadcasting. Our predictions tonight. Prediction 1. Have the Epsom Tea Party tapes damaged Acton National's chances? The market has plunged to only a 26% probability of National having 50% or more of the party vote in the wake of this storm in a teacup. With a backlash brewing, is National to win in Epsom a good buy? Prediction 2. The market are predicting the Green Party will take 11.1% party vote. How can the Greens overcome their low turnout election day curse, and what can they actually achieve if elected? Prediction 3. The market are predicting only a 19% probability of Jacinda Ardern taking Auckland Central. Would her loss in this previously safe seat suggest a Labour Party meltdown? To dissect these predictions, let me introduce tonight's panel. She is one of the best Gen X political leaders this country has ever elected, Green Party co-leader Metiria Turei. And she is one of the new hopes for the Labour Party, high-ranking Jedi Knight of the left and Labour Party candidate for Auckland Central, Jacinda Ardern. Welcome to you both. We'll also wrap the show with a final prediction, but let's kick things off with tonight's first market prediction. In the wake of the Epsom Tea Party tape fiasco, the probability of National gaining 50% or more of the party vote plummeted last night to a mere 26% probability. Is there a backlash brewing? Jacinda, if Helen Clark had gagged the media by bringing in the police to hide a secret conversation 2 weeks out from the election, the mainstream media would be calling for a revolution. Isn't using the police to threaten newspapers nanny state on steroids?
It is pretty extraordinary. But I think the public see it for what it is. I mean, you invite all of the country's media to a tea party, a conversation, and then you become extraordinarily nervous when the content of that conversation may potentially be revealed. So, obviously in hiding it, it's really raising questions in people's mind. And if John Key doesn't want to have to discuss this every day till the election, I think he's going to have to release it.
What sort of arrogance does it suggest? That you would say anything controversial with the media merely meters away from you?
Obviously, John Key didn't watch the royal wedding and see that they actually had lip readers at the royal wedding. It is possible to figure out what kind of conversations are going on. So it does strike me as ill-advised.
And what sort of endorsement was it actually in the end? Because John Key walked out of that saying, I'm still voting for Goldsmith, but you all kind of make up your own mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's such mixed messaging as well. I mean, at the end of the day, the voters of Epsom are going to make up their own minds. I mean, I've been told how to vote so many times that I think that they'll absolutely know where they want to go. And to be fair, we've seen the indicators of Banks already. Banks hasn't changed his stripes, and Epsom will know that.
If you're looking at 10 to 15% of the electorate haven't made up their mind yet who they're going to vote for, do you think the idea of a brash key government...
They're just waiting for ACT to actually implode.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Do you think a brash key government is enough to make people decide to vote for opposition parties?
Absolutely. If that's not what is, a brash key government I think is frightening.
I mean, if John Key's prepared to sell 49% of the assets, then Tom Brash is certainly prepared to sell the other 51%,
It makes you wonder, though, if that's what the conversation was. Was it whether or not we'd have a Banks key government?
Right.
That's what I'm wondering.
Metiria, you've flirted with the National Party via the media by suggesting a coffee date with John Key. In the wake of this fiasco, would you be holding...
suggestion of a coffee date with John Key. So I don't think you quite got that right.
No cup of tea, so you wouldn't meet... There's no suggestion of a cup of tea?
No
little sort of public meeting?
No.
To suggest anything?
Not with Phil, not with Annette, not with John, not with Bill, no.
So the Green Party would not be meeting with anyone in public?
We aren't. We have no planned meetings with any of those leaders. And we haven't met with either the Labour leadership or the National Party leadership since Parliament was sitting. So no.
Would you consider a coffee date with Phil Goff?
No,
Why
I just
not?
don't think it's necessary. I mean, our job, my job, is to talk about my Green Party campaign. Jobs, rivers and kids. A clean green economy that works for everyone. That is what I'm focused on. Other leaders can take care of their parties and their issues, but I'm very focused on the Green Party and our campaign.
So the media got it wrong, and you would not be looking to have any coffee date with John Key at this?
No such plans for such thing, and we haven't had any plans for such a thing.
Have there been any overtures from the National Party, other than Bill English through the media saying that you deserved 10%?
I know, wasn't that sweet?
It was kind of him, wasn't it? Wasn't it weird?
No, but one of the interesting things about this campaign is that neither National or Labor, as we've seen in past campaigns, with respect, have attacked the Greens. It's been a very interesting difference, and I think a big difference from previous campaigns where we've been actively attacked.
Do you think any of this hoo-ha over the activists is going to be a problem for you?
Well, we are handling it, I think, in the way that real leadership is about. Actually, we've been open and transparent about what we know, which is that a Green Party member was an organiser for that. We are taking action about that
But
and being upfront about it.
What can you do? You know,
It's right,
activists.
people will take action and do the things that they do, but we have been the subject of many dirty tricks in the past election campaigns, and we do not play that game. So we are very disappointed that one of our members was so closely associated with that.
Almost as disappointed as Whale Oil coming up with another story that the mainstream media pick up and just run with. As disappointed as that?
Yes, he doesn't tend to be on my reading list.
No, I can imagine. Both of you. John Key has compared this microphone recording him at a press conference to the world of the news phone hacking of a family of a murdered child.
Yeah.
Doesn't the media have a responsibility in an election to hold the powerful to account? And how can Key claim a principle of privacy that is there to protect citizens from a surveillance state, not help the Prime Minister hide what he said?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really obvious to people the differences between those two scenarios. I don't think we need to.
He was adamant.
We don't
He was
need to
adamant
explain them.
on First Line TV3 this morning. It was exactly the same thing.
If he can't see the differences, I can't help him
there
there.
is an issue here, though. I mean,
yeah,
I
agree.
think
You and Grant were talking this morning about the issue around recordings, and I agree on that.
Yeah, but
absolutely.
I think, John's overreaction to this, both with taking the complaint to the police and with this ridiculous comparison, which is really quite offensive to that family. That's the thing. It's really deeply offensive. So I think it's typical of John Key's approach. I think that when he gets in sticky positions like this, he behaves badly, he behaves weakly. He doesn't take a genuine leadership approach, and I think that's been obvious. You know, we support the right to privacy. That was why we opposed the video surveillance legislation, and why we've, opposed.
But sadly, Labor didn't. Sadly, Labor voted for it. Terrible of them.
But we oppose that legislation because we support people's right to privacy.
Exactly.
John, I would hope, might have learnt a bit of a lesson. I doubt that's true, but one would like to be hopeful about that. So he does have the right to keep that conversation private if he wants to.
Let's talk about that. I mean, can you, as the Prime Minister, hold on to those sorts of protections, which are really built for the citizen to resist the state?
Yeah.
Surely he, as the Prime Minister, there's a public interest. If he's saying something different privately than he is publicly, why can't the public know about it?
And it's interesting because then actually the test that he becomes measured by is a public test.
Yes.
And we have to acknowledge that when you're a politician, you do have two tests that are held up for you. You do have the rights and protections of a citizen, and that's that piece of law that's still sitting on the order paper and hasn't gone through yet. One of the reasons Labor wants to support it, although we're still waiting for National to make some pretty big changes that actually relate to protecting the media,
good,
which is incredibly important for us, was actually to really codify and set out that to make sure that some agencies didn't go beyond the realms of powers that Parliament would see as acceptable or not.
Like the pork board.
Exactly. So that hasn't gone through yet, but we do think that needs to be really set out clearly and protections set out for citizens. But as I say, John Key is a citizen. He gets those protections, but we've got a whole other bar.
That's right.
A whole other bar.
That's right. Sometimes politicians we have to compromise our private rights because we are involved in the political process. And if it was me and I'd said something stupid on tape and it was known to the media, you just confess and then you move on.
Sure.
You make it public. You deal with it up front. Now, John Key doesn't tend to be up front, which is a problem. And compared to what Paula did, I mean, that was the other issue.
Wasn't that outrageous
Paula,
using that comparison?
That's right. And so Paula Bennett exposes private information of beneficiaries when they
because she complained.
Yeah, that's right, because she complained about what's happening.
To complain.
And then John Key hassles the Human Rights Commission for potentially taking action.
And claims that it's a danger it's a breach of Bennett's rights.
Yeah,
Bennett's
that's right.
Well,
So
what's interesting is they use the public interest test for that one.
Yeah.
What greater public interest is there than 11 days out from an election, understanding what the Prime Minister has agreed to with a potential coalition partner? That is the true public interest test.
Is there also an issue here? If John Key had been bugged at home or in a private hotel or a conference centre where we're talking, then I think people would say, hey, that's not fair.
Yeah.
But this was a press conference.
No, but it wasn't though. I mean, you know, we know if we were to call a press conference and have the media there, and then it's over and the media leave, and I have a conversation in that same room with the same person, that is a private conversation, and I will defend his right to identify that as a private space. So although there was that ridiculous.
Should the media print it? Should the media print it?
Well, I think they need to make their own ethical decision about that, actually, about whether they would print something that was
If it
private.
had been Helen Clark, would they print it?
But yeah, they probably wouldn't.
Right,
so.
right. If it's right, if it was Helen Clark, they would have printed it.
But ultimately, I mean, John Key has made sure that there's a pretty big stick waving over the top of these media outlets
Yeah,
over this.
That's right.
That was an overreaction.
Which, you know, was a pretty extreme response. So he's tried to push the decision-making away from him. I think he needs to show some leadership.
He's weak.
At a 26% probability of national gaining an outright majority, would you buy it because New Zealanders will hand that power over to National, or short it because the Tea Party tapes add a level of market uncertainty, forcing John Key to find coalition partners? Are they going to get 50%?
I don't think but I don't think it's got much to do with the Tea Party tapes, to be honest. I
think
it's
New Zealanders don't like a majority.
Yeah, I think that they will just shift their votes as a result. Yeah, and so if they see success like that, they'll move
short.
Yeah, I've never believed that National would get over 50% because for that very reason, you know, I think New Zealanders don't like delivering an election outcome
It's a
like
prime
that.
ministership, not a kingship, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, panel. Let's move on to prediction 2. The market is predicting the Green Party will gain 11.1% of the party vote. But with their history of great pre-election polling and bad election day voting, will the Greens step up, and who will they cut a deal with? Metiria, it's November. I'll put a question that I gave Matthew Hooton yesterday. It's November the 27th. The Epsom Tea Party strategy has worked, and ACT hold the balance of power. John Key rings you and says, Don wants to sell all the assets. If we go into coalition with the Greens, we'll only sell 49%. Do you go into coalition with National to prevent hard right Armageddon, or do you refuse to become the next dead rat swallowing Māori party?
It is an interesting question. And the answer is not that straightforward because we would need... On the face of that question, the answer is no.
Right.
But that is not actually the decision of the politicians, because any decision about things like that goes back to our party membership. Yeah, so our members make that decision. But you know, that scenario, like we would demand a great deal more in a circumstance like that.
Right.
But it is so
but
highly unlikely.
you could see the pressure the Greens would come under into that sort of scenario, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and I understand that, and you know.
And how long if let's say John calls you and says we'd like to cut a deal, how long before you could go to your membership? What sort of hooey routine would you be able to do before you could?
It would be within a couple of weeks.
Okay, so
so quickly we can do that quite quickly. We can measure that quite quickly. So and we wouldn't want to do anything like. We wouldn't want to take very long to go through a process like that. But I actually think it's going to be a great deal simpler than we think. And so I think it's highly unlikely that we would need to have that conference. I think it'll be a lot clearer on the day.
But any decision that you would need to go with, you're going to go back to the membership?
Yeah, we have to.
So even if Labor said, hey, look, we've got the numbers and Winston will sit on the side benches or whatever.
Even if a coalition or confidence supply deal with Labor would require that. Well, at least I know that we've got it booked, so that we've got time booked if we need to, so members know. It's a delegated conference as well, so members are organising for that just in case it happens, but it is highly unlikely.
Jacinda, are the Greens gaining because Labor are no longer seen as a viable opposition? And are Labor being naive in Epsom, when Epsom is clearly a rort, not to ask voters, as the Greens have, to strategically vote for National Party candidate Paul Goldsmith?
I think it's a disservice to suddenly say that Greens are only doing what they're doing by virtue of what's going on with another party. You know, I think a little more credit there is due. But, you know, our focus within Labor is making sure, you know, I've always been very open, and this is quite different to the scenarios we're seeing in Epsom, for instance. I've always been very open. I want a Labour-Green coalition. For me, that's the kind of coalition that I think is going to deliver
the dream
things.
every Liberal has.
It's the kind of government that I think will deliver our goals. And you have seen some similarities in policy, and I think that that's a positive thing, not something to be negative about. But that then ultimately comes down to individual voters deciding what they strategically do.
Right.
So it's not so much about having to go around having secret deals, but talking openly about, well, if this is the kind of coalition that you're interested in, then that you think about your voting in those terms.
Right.
From Labour's perspective, we have to, of course, be very careful, though, because party vote is incredibly important for us to make sure that we are at a level that still allows us to constitute a position to negotiate. And so that means getting a decent party vote in as well. So that's where always that tension lies, and that's why Labour candidates will always campaign for 2 ticks. But also, when I meet a Green voter, I then have a conversation about strategic voting, and that's just the way it works locally.
I do think it's worthwhile remembering too that there's this huge mix of people who vote between National and Labour. There is more wash between National and Labour than there is between Labour and the Greens.
Okay.
So I think that, because that's how Labour gets to be government and National gets to be government. There's this huge body of people that move between. So this idea that people identify themselves very hard on those positions is just not right, and that makes it a more complicated calculation then around where is vote coming from. The Greens get vote from Labour and from National, not at the same numbers, but at not dissimilar numbers that we've seen in the past. So the wash is quite significant between all three.
With Winston, maybe making the greatest comeback since Lazarus, if he does get over 5% and he does put himself in a crossbench situation, New Zealand First has always frustrated the Greens in having any real sort of achievement coming forward. Does that mean a blue-green government's more likely because Winston would just shut down anything that you would try with Labour?
Well, that depends on... No, I don't think so at all. I think where Winston's position would be a great deal less powerful than it has been in the past.
Right.
I think he's going to get somewhere around the 5%, a little bit on it or just under. That's what I think is probably. He might end up the same position as he was in last time.
I don't think he'll wield the same power.
No, so there is a bit of an issue.
Question to both of you: in the past, the Greens have lacked the Labour Party's machinery on election day to get the vote out. However, this election, with over 11,000 members on your Facebook site, the Greens have evolved into a massive online community, allowing immediate contact to mobilise. How important will online be in getting the vote out November 26th?
It's critical. So one of the main campaign tools we're using is the heykiwi.org, which is where you can go into this heykiwi.org site. You can check whether you're enrolled, you can enrol if you're not, and you get to be able to download free New Zealand music. New Zealand musicians have given their music free for this purpose.
Lovely.
And then
the feelers? God, okay.
There's a long list of them. Newtown Rocksteady was the one I got. So you can download, and if you want to, we can text you on election day to remind you. So there is a system, and that text has been checked by the Electoral Commission, so it's all fine. So we're using techniques like that and other kinds as well as the more standard ones, which is what the Labour machine has always been so fantastic at, which is door knocking and getting people actually in the cars.
Labour are doing a huge amount of work this election, more than they actually did in 2008, and getting the numbers out there. That's the old-fashioned way. How have you done it with the online community?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's about making sure we use every tool. So, we'll keep with the tried and true, but also making sure that we try and incorporate to the degree that we can, because on election day itself, you suddenly get into a lockdown of limitation around what you can do online. So, it's about doing all that preparatory work beforehand, I think. But there's nothing that I don't think beats that face-to-face contact. But the question then becomes, well, doesn't necessarily always have to be someone standing on your doorstep with a rosette, but making sure that you then build those networks of family and friends who get each other out. Because even when you're a door knocker, someone might say to you just to get you off their doorstep, you are voted, but haven't necessarily. And half of that groundwork is just convincing people how critical it is that they vote. And, you know, in past elections, the Don Brash election, people got out because they were scared. And they should be scared again. They should be really worried about what would happen this time around.
I've heard of other groups too organising, so they have a person who lives in a neighbourhood and they're responsible for the 10 houses in their neighbourhood, next door to them, 5 on the other side or something like that. So people are trying to take responsibility. But in that way, which is very localised.
This is the first time in New Zealand's history that we've had 3 million people enrolled for the election. What kind of voter turnout are you expecting?
I think middling. I think it'd be fairly average, to be honest. I do agree. I think that people might well vote because they're frightened, but then if it always seems, elections where you have a big swing one way, people on the other side don't tend to come out as easily because they don't see there's any point. So that's the risk that we run.
For those living in poverty, that electorate of poverty who was suffering so much, got more reason to vote in this election than they've ever had in their lives, haven't they?
And that's why my message the entire time has been, it's MMP. Folks, you know, we never concede a thing. You don't know what kind of, you know, iterations you might get on election day. So go vote, because every single vote counts, and that's why it's so important to vote for MMP at the same at the same time. But turnout will be key. I think we'll get higher than 79% this time.
Okay. With the market predicting the Greens on 11.1% party vote, would you buy because the Greens will get more than that, or short because pre-election Green support is always aspirational and fades once people get to the ballot box?
No, I think with the polls heading up around 12.5 steadily, pretty steadily, and sort of between 10 and 12.5, I think that 11 is a good bet.
Yeah. 11.
I'm picking the Greens.
Double figures.
I'm picking the Greens will do well this time, but equally, we've got to make sure our Labour voters do our bit, make sure that we're a solid vote as well.
Yes. Thank you, panel. Moving on to prediction 3. I predicting Jacinda Ardern has only a 19% probability of winning Auckland Central. Jacinda, the market says the most educated and liberal election in the country want Nikki Kaye to represent them. If you lose Auckland Central, does this suggest a total meltdown of the Labour Party vote, or is the market misreading this electorate?
I think the market's misreading it. You know, we've always said this seat is going to be incredibly close. We've always said that, and there's no doubt about that. But on iPredict, it's just been all over the place.
It has. I've watched it jump all over the place.
I think that's actually just a little bit of you know, people, you know,
emotional
speculating
market
wildly.
Speculation.
Yeah, and I think that there are some people who are getting on there pretty religiously and voting one particular way.
How did you feel after the backbencher debate?
Good. I thought it was a good debate. You know, it was difficult. It was
totally awesome.
It was pretty rowdy. It was not always the easiest forum to get your points across. But I think one thing was clear: there is a massive difference, in my view, between the picture that the national candidate paints locally and what her government's vision is for this seat. So a massive divide there, and I think that can only last so long.
Reality disconnect?
I think there is a reality disconnect.
Metiria, on current polling, Green Auckland Central candidate, the lovely Denise Roche, is in on the party list.
Yep.
Which begs the question, where her 4,500 Green electorate votes should be recycled to. Who is more of a friend to the environment? Nikki Kaye and her party's extensive mining program, or Jacinda Ardern and her party's poor 9-year record on the environment?
Well, it's true that if you want Denise, if you personally support Denise and you want her in Parliament, then give her the party vote. That is the way
because
to get Denise
polling,
into Parliament. Yep,
she's in.
That's right. So, and we can get her in, and she'll be fantastic. In terms of National Labour,
4,500 votes that is
National Labour in terms of the environment policy, National's environment policy is appalling. Labour's is better, but it will only continue to be better with respect as long as there are Greens there to keep them on that.
Because they do bow a little to the dairy industry, don't they?
They do wiggle around a little on occasion. So we need the Greens there to keep them honest. But my view is vote for the person who best represents you. There's nothing better than voting for what you actually want.
And who does? So the Greens would say National has an appalling environmental record.
Oh yeah, it does. Of course it does. And they are absolutely committed to deep sea oil drilling. They're absolutely committed to mining.
120 points could release today.
Yeah, I know. And 120 points of just absolute rubbish. It's so distressing to see that the government could do that and think they could get away with it. So National is not the party for the environment at all. They are very destructive, and people know that. I think.
And do you know, Bomber, I just want to add, you know, I've absolutely always believed as well that we can't take simply for granted that if someone's a Green Party voter that they should automatically then pass a vote to me. I know I have to earn that vote. I know I have to demonstrate that I have the credentials that earns that vote, and so I'm not taking that for granted, but I absolutely hope it's in the measure of their consideration, because it could be the difference between this remaining a government-held seat and Auckland Central sending a really strong message to the government that they're unhappy with the direction that they're heading and handing the seat back to the left.
Can you work with, if you won, could you work with Len Brown's vision for Auckland?
Absolutely, absolutely. His vision's more ambitious than government's vision.
Question to both of you. Could the Greens work better with Labour or National, or have the years of abuse the Labour Party have given the Greens burnt those bridges? Why isn't Phil having a soy latte with Russell Norman? Why? Why isn't he? What's going on? Why aren't they looking like an alternative government?
I think on this election, it is critical that the Greens campaign on our own strengths.
Yep.
We are not reliant on Labour or their largesse for our political power.
You've earned it. You've earned it this time.
We've earned it. We are now the third largest political party. You know, we look at all of those other ones: New Zealand First, United Future, Alliance. You know, they've all yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we have earned our space, our political space, and we don't need someone else to give us that credit. Another political party to give us that credit. But the truth is that a Labour. Working with Labour in a coalition arrangement is our preference. We think that
it is the only version of government that will stop asset sales. I cannot make that point strongly enough. The only version of government that will stop asset sales is if National is gone. That's the switch we need.
How many of the Green Party caucus would we see in the minister's position?
That's our decision.
You're passing over a lot of power to me over here.
That is our decision.
I know I'm number 13.
Question to both of you.
I've got it written up here.
With the market predicting Jacinda at 16% probability of winning Auckland Central, is it a buy because you've got far greater chance of winning, or is Auckland Central now Nikki K's town?
Buy. Although the good loyal people who have always purchased my stock, they're pretty happy, I think, with things are currently.
Look, they're going to get a huge payout if you actually nail it. That's right. Buy or short? Buy. Look at that. Thank you, panel. Let's wrap the show with final prediction. Jacinda, your final prediction this evening.
I am sticking with my prediction of last show when I appeared with you, Bomber, because I believe I predicted that ACT would be gone after this election.
That's right.
I did not predict that the little Tea Party scenario would occur, but I feel like it's reinforced my prediction. So I'm just going to hammer it home one more time. ACT gone.
Oh, look at that. Thank you, Jacinda. Metiria, your final prediction.
Of that, I would predict that that's not. I don't think that that's as likely.
Oh, really?
No, I think that there's a much better chance that ACT will make it through with this election, but that there will be a war of the checkbooks for the leadership of ACT afterwards, which is what we saw with Don Brash when he paid for his membership,
his membership,
and John Banks certainly will be waiving his checkbook afterwards as well.
Thank you, Jacinda. Thank you, Metiria. To my final prediction. After a blistering performance by Mana Party leader Hone Harawira on Native Affairs debate last night, the little traded stock of Mana Party winning Te Tai Tokerau by more than the by-election majority of 1,117 votes at a 64% probability has to be today's best buy. Tomorrow night, I am joined by National Party MP Simon Bridges and Labour Party MP Grant Robinson. Please follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook accounts for all my latest election updates. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow, 7 p.m. for iPredict Election 2011, exclusively on Stratus TV. Until then, get trading.